is actually Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. Now, has anybody in here known anyone or had colorectal cancer in their family or with their friends or anything like that?
Cool. You have?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I have as well. So it's a very, very serious thing, and it's something that's not talked about very much. You know, I think when we think about cancer, what is the cancer that you always think about that gets the publicity?
Breast
cancer, exactly. I think that reason is just because women, we know how to get the word out usually. So when it's something that predominantly affects women, I think it's easier to get the messaging out. But colorectal cancer is something that is not talked about very frequently. And it's something that deserves a lot more attention, because a lot of times before somebody even goes to the doctor, they experience signs and symptoms and issues before they ever actually do anything about it. So with colorectal cancer, prevention is really the key. So that's why Colorectal Cancer Month is celebrated or recognized, or however you want to say it, in the month of March, which that's where we are right now, is in the month of March. We have several physicians on staff here that perform colonoscopies, general surgeons as well as gastroenterologists, and we actually have an endoscopy center in Loganville where you can have that colonoscopy done outpatient, and you don't have to come here to the hospital or anything like that. And we'll make sure that you guys have those brochures before you leave today about that, if you would like further information. So we are excited to have with us today, and I'm going to let her kind of tell her a little bit about herself, but this is Miss Quinaria Streeter, and she's actually interning with us right now as a health promotions major from the University of Georgia. Hey, come on in. I got your lunch ready for you back there. So she's a health promotions major at the University of Georgia. And, you know, as part of health promotions, prevention is the key, right, Quinarius? Yeah. And colorectal cancer is something, since it is kind of celebrated this month and recognized this month, that we wanted to bring a little presentation to you guys about. So I'll let you tell them a little bit about who you are and where you're from and all that good stuff, and then you can go ahead and get started, okay?
Okay. Well, like she said, I'm Quinaria Streeter. I'm an intern from the University of Georgia, and I'm a fourth year this year, and I'll be graduating in May, so almost there. All right, so today we're going to be talking about colorectal cancer, and what colorectal cancer is rectal cancer and colon cancer, but they show very similar signs and symptoms, and they're also pretty much classified in the same way, so they kind of slurred them together and made it colorectal cancer. But there is a difference. It is colon cancer and there is rectal cancer. Okay, so before we start talking about the two types of cancers, let's just first talk about the normal digestive system, and then it'll make more sense how it can malfunction and cause cancer later. So for the normal digestive system, you'll chew your food, swallow it. Once you swallow it, it goes down the esophagus, and it first goes to the stomach where it's partially digested by acids, and then it'll go to the small intestine. Your small intestine is this inner portion of the intestine right here, and that's where most of the nutrients from the food that you eat is going to be absorbed. And after that, it'll go to the larger intestine, which is the outside of the small intestine, and that also absorbs some nutrients and water. And from there, it'll go down to the rectum, and you will use the restroom. Okay, and then, like I said, the large intestine and the small intestine both absorb nutrients from food, and the large intestine also holds your stool. And that's the waste from the food that you eat after it has absorbed all the nutrients and all of that. Okay, so when we talk about colorectal cancer, colon or rectal cancer, it basically is cancer of the large intestine, not the small intestine. So what happens is over time, just by natural causes, sometimes it has a little bit to do with diet, obesity, things like that, you will begin to develop polyps. And what polyps are is just a punging out of the large intestine from the inside of the large intestine, and it'll grow towards the center of your large intestine. And you can kind of see in this picture right over here what it might look like, and it could happen anywhere along the colon, and it could also happen in the bottom part of the rectum. But most polyps are non-cancerous. Just sometimes when they keep dividing abnormally, sometimes they can become cancerous. Okay, so here's another picture of how a polyp can form. You can also have a flat polyp or a raised polyp. A raised polyp will kind of look more like a light bulb, and a flat polyp will look more like a pimple in a sense. And it is considered that the flat polyps might be a little bit more dangerous than the raised polyps that look like light bulbs. But when the polyp is cancerous, it's called edematous. And most of those, 95% of edematous polyps are cancerous. But if your polyp is not edematous, it's most likely not cancerous. Okay, so early detection of these polyps is really the only way to prevent them, because like I said, it's not much that you can do like individually to avoid them from growing. Half the time they grow just because your cells have divided so many times and they lost the ability to regulate their cell growth. So now they're growing abnormally and it causes this precancerous polyp to grow. And like I said, 95% of the edematous polyps are cancerous. And if you see the picture down below, you can see like a normal polyp will start to develop and it's benign. Benign meaning non-cancerous, it's non-harmful to you, and it's probably not much to worry about. But once it keeps growing and growing and you see masses of cells clumping together, it's something you need to start paying attention to, and it could possibly become cancerous. And like I said, this can happen anywhere along the colon or in the lower portion in the rectum. Okay, and this is just another picture of the difference between the raised polyps and the flat polyps. And like I said, this can happen just because cells divide so much that they lose the ability to regulate their cell division, and this little tumor growth can start to develop, or just because there are mutations in your DNA somehow through, they can be environmental exposures, it can just be mistakes in replication of DNA when cells are divided, and these polyps can also form. And like I said before, the flat polyps are considered to be more dangerous, more something to worry about than the raised polyps. Okay, and the biggest risk factor for these polyps developing is just being over the age of 50. And like I said, that's just because over time your cells have been replicating for so many years that they do lose their function to regulate how they grow and how they divide. So being over 50 is the biggest risk factor. Also, having a family history of individuals who've had polyps or who have had colon or rectal cancer is also a big risk factor, just because if they're closer genetically related to you, it's just a more likely risk factor that you might have it as well. And if you've had previous polyps or cancer or previous colon or rectal cancer in the past, it's more likely to come back. And other risk factors, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, any problems in your gut area, anything like that, they're more likely to come back. They're also starting to show that it is decreasing among the older population, and it's also starting to be a problem among the younger population too. So there's more research going into why that is. And then if you've had ovarian or uterine cancer, that's also been seen to increase your risk for polyps or for rectal or colon cancer. And some things you can do as prevention-wise are just some of the basic things that you always hear. Eat right, try to eat as many whole grains, fruits, and vegetables as you can, and items with a lot of fiber. Fiber is known to help your microbes in your gut digest the food and push your stool out more smoothly. And physical activity, maintaining a healthy BMI, body weight, eliminating smoking, any type of tobacco use, decreasing your alcohol use, because alcohol does go through the same system, and it is absorbed in the body by the small intestine and everything, just like the nutrients in your food. So that also plays an impact. And knowing your family history. If you have people in your family who've had polyps or have had colon cancer, go get screened just to be sure, and that way you can catch it early, because that is really the biggest way to prevent these polyps from becoming cancerous, is if you catch them when they're benign. Okay, and some statistics, like I said, over 90% of all new cases of colorectal cancer do occur in people over the age of 50, so being over 50 is the biggest risk factor. And colorectal cancer is the second leading cause of death of all cancers in the U.S., so it is a really big problem. We just don't give it that much attention. And people of certain ethnic descents are also more likely to have colorectal cancer, and those are Jews of Eastern Europe descent. They're more likely to have higher rates of cancer. African Americans are also more likely to develop colon cancer and less likely to survive from colon cancer. So, and Native Americans and Alaskan Natives as well. So if you're any of that descent, or if you have any of that and running through your bloodline, it's always good to go get screened and make sure you stay on top of it and don't just let it go unnoticed. And some signs that you might notice that something's going wrong is if there's blood in your stool. Sometimes that is a sign of colon or rectal cancer, but at the same time that could just be anything else. Like, the symptoms are very rare. That's why the screening tests are the best way to prevent them, because it's just hard to catch it yourself. Okay, some of the American Cancer Society recommendations is that once you hit 50, both men and women should go get either one of these screening tests. So the sigmoid test, it goes in the colon a little bit, but it will not get the entire colon. So the doctor could go in and see maybe some polyps, but he would not be able to see throughout your ascending, transverse, and descending colon. And then you could also send in fecal samples. From what I understand, you just smear a sample of your fecal, you can fold it up in an envelope, mail it to the doctor, and they can test it there at the lab. And samples that are in the fecal can tell them whether or not you might be at risk for colon or rectal cancer. And then you can also get what is in this picture is a colonoscopy, and that's considered the gold standard test. That's the best test you could get to detect colorectal cancer. And that's when they just kind of put a microscope and a light up your rectum, and it goes through the entire colon, and the doctor could see any type of polyps that are there, whether they're benign or cancerous, in the rectum and the colon. And there's also a digital test that the doctor can do with their fingers, but that will he will only be able to reach the rectum part. He won't be able to go up into the colon. Okay, and like I said, the stool test you can send in, and they can just test your stool DNA to see if you might have any abnormalities. They can also test the blood of your stool. If you have blood in your stool, they can test that to see if there are any polyps. And like I said, if any of these tests come back positive, you should go get a colonoscopy, because like I said, that is the gold standard, and that will let them be able to see anything that's going wrong, whether it's in the rectum and the colon. Okay? And that is all I have for you guys.
What causes the polyps that are not malignant that form?
Just normal cell growth. Like, there's really nothing you can do besides like diet, exercise, and try to keep yourself as healthy as possible. And like I said, eat a lot of fiber, because fiber is shown to help you digest more easily and move your stool quickly.
You've got a picture on that. The polyps are not necessarily inside the colon. They can be outside, right? No,
they start inside and they grow towards the center of the colon. And what can sometimes happen is stool can get into those polyps and cause nasty infections.
Okay, so the one that had the bump to the outside was actually growing towards the center.
Mm-hmm. It's just some of them are more bulb shaped and some of them are more flat. Or some of them also, they start on the inside, but they might dip down a little bit. It's just all how they feel like growing at the time.
Why do any of those things occur after age 50?
Just because over the time, like, your cells replicate millions of times per second. So after the age of 50, they've just been replicating for so long that they cannot regulate their cell growth anymore. And that's for any type of cancer. That's really all cancer is. The cells have lost their ability to regulate their growth. So now they're growing more rapidly and they're causing tumors. And that's really all a polyp is. And that could be for a tumor in the breast, anywhere. And mutations in your DNA, if you're exposed to a lot of radiation, stuff like that. Chemicals that they put in the food that might be environmentally hazardous. Work sites that have hazardous chemicals. Radiation from sunlight, anything like that can mutate your DNA and cause the cells to more quickly lose their ability to regulate their cell growth. Any more questions?
Any good news on the horizon toward improved medications, or you showed some reductions in
well, like I said,
survivability, right?
It is showing that in the older population, the new cases of colorectal cancer are decreasing, but now we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the younger population, which they're still doing research to figure out why that is. But like I said, once you get that they want you to start at 50, either doing the fecal test or the oculate blood test or doing the colonoscopy, and that way you can catch it early. And the biggest way to prevent colorectal cancer is to catch the polyps early, and if they're benign, you can have the choice of removing them or not, but if it was me, I would remove them just in case, because the longer you let it be benign, the more likely it can overregulate, get bigger, and cause more problems.
You have to sign in advance for a colonoscopy to give the doctor permission to remove polyps?
Mm-hmm, you do.
So you don't have to go back the second time?
Yeah, that's true.
Most people would opt for that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's still your personal choice. If they're benign, you can choose to leave them.
So I noticed that it said have one every 10 years. I was surprised. I figured it would be more like 5 or 3 or something.
Well, that's just because like these things do take time. They just don't appear overnight. So if you do it every 10 years, you're definitely likely to catch it at an early stage. Like you might not catch it when it first appears, but if you do it every 10 years, you'll definitely catch it before it becomes cancerous. But like I said, if you don't want to do the colonoscopy every 10 years, which is like the full exam, you can do little fecal tests every now and then, and that can also detect it as well. If you don't want to do like the invasive one, because I don't hear a lot of people enjoying
It's
it.
not much fun. I just had one, that's why.
You know Dr. Ferris Johnson over at Athens?
I haven't.
You're in school in Georgia, right?
Mhm.
He's a prominent African-American doctor there that my wife sees. Because our daughter is a pharmaceutical doctor in Athens. This guy's really, really good. He's an MD, but he specializes in endocrinology.
Okay.
And we've gone to his seminars. He was at Prince Avenue before their recent breakup, and now he's at St. Mary's,
No,
right?
he was at Athens Regional,
Okay, and now he's where?
St. Mary's.
He's very, very well known there.
Okay, I'm gonna get in contact with him.
Tell me, when does this colonoscopy, when did all this start?
Well, it's always been recommended. It's just it hasn't been put in the public eye as much because I feel like it's a touchy subject and not a lot of people want to talk about it because of, I feel, the location where it is and how you detect it. And it's really uncomfortable. A lot of people don't brag about having a colonoscopy, but it's been around for a long time.
Like in the 50s?
Well-
I don't remember ever hearing anything like that.
Well, I don't know if the colonoscopy has been around since the 50s, but the smaller tests like the stool samples or the stool blood samples have been around for a long time. But this gold standard, I want to say, has been around for a good 2-3 decades, I want to say.
Well, I've had one, my wife confirmed that she's had removed that, but she didn't have cancer. So.
Yeah, like I said, most of them are benign. Most of the polyps are benign.
How does Obamacare interact with the colonoscopy? I guess we may see that in the pamphlet. Is that automatically covered under Medicare for certain, every so often?
Okay, with that, I'm pretty sure that's still like depending on what type of insurance you have. But for most insurances, I do believe that all screening type prevention things are covered fully in the exam. Anything prevention wise is most likely going to be fully covered.
I know there's certain things covered now, like annual physicals that are covered.
Yeah.
Because that's an expensive process, isn't it? Colonoscopy, like $2,000 or $3,000.
I have no idea the price, but I'm pretty sure it's up there. Just like everything
Might
else
not
in
be able to pay the
healthcare.
rent, you better find out.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you say it's more prevalent now with the younger age group.
Well, it's not more prevalent, but we are starting to see more cases of it in the
What
younger
do you think
population.
maybe because of that?
I would honestly say it might have to do with contributing factors like obesity, lack of physical activity, things like that. And in the younger population, they are starting to eat cigs and they do smoke pretty often and maybe not eating enough fiber in their diet. There are just many factors that can contribute to it. So if I had to guess, those are the ones I would guess.
You see the day when you're gonna have to get a license to have children.
No, I don't.
Somebody got to check out some of these people. We've got too many bad eggs.
Yeah, that's
Know
true.
what I mean?
That's true. Well, I know now health insurance isn't covering a lot of the cost of childbirth like they used to. So that might be weeding some people out from having the babies if you can't afford $3,000-$4,000 to have a child, because I know a lot of insurance companies are not covering the whole procedure anymore. So that might weed a lot of people out.
On these medical problems, it seems like that your work has gotten, well, obviously we all know it's much better, but every time you get over the hill, you realize there's another hill.
And I feel like
the last hill.
just being a health promotion specialist, that's mainly what we deal with, is trying to change people's lifestyle behaviors. Because like I said, many cancers, heart disease, many chronic conditions can definitely be avoided. But like I said, in a fast-paced lifestyle, it's not always easy to go work out after you get off work. It's not always economically convenient to cook the healthiest meal. So, I mean, a lot of things like that, just eating, diet, physical activity, the basic things that we could do to prevent a lot of these illnesses are actually the hardest things to do, and there are a lot of the reasons we have a lot of the chronic diseases we have today. So like if we could make small lifestyle changes, it would make a huge impact on our value of life later and the conditions that we see, and actually our medical costs could actually go down a lot if so many people, if we didn't have to do heart transplants every year and things like that. It would make healthcare a lot cheaper for everyone.